the one born for a moment. When the missile awakens the prophecy, the tear behind the golden curtain, the star hidden in the darkness, the call for such a time as this. The church in the final battle. The return of Hamon in the old story. Esther's final door. There was a woman who once stood between the throne of an empire, not to be honored but to stop a river of blood from being spilled. She did not wear armor. She did not walk onto a battlefield. She had only one thing, the courage born from prayer. They called her Esther, and she was born for such a time as this, not by accident, not at the wrong time. She was the vital link between a dying people and a king blinded by power. Esther stepped into King Xerxes' chamber uninvited. She knew just one wrong step could cost her life. But she also knew if she stayed silent, an entire nation would perish. And she chose to step in because she understood there are moments when silence is no longer an option. Welcome to Prayer Station. Over 2,000 years later, another name echoes across the map of the world. Not Xerxes, not Persia, but Iran. And once again, the name Israel is surrounded by threats, weapons, and life or death decisions made in the shadows, but this time you don't just hear the story. You are living in it. You're not in the palace. You don't wear a queen's robe. You're not standing in the face of genocide like Esther, but you are in a moment not so different. A moment where two ancient forces, Persia and Israel, face off once more. A moment where a small nation once again becomes the focus of global hostility. And once again, someone is being called to rise, not to become a queen, not to enter a palace, but to not ignore an invitation that's echoed since ancient days. An invitation for those who know they were not born into the final chapter just to watch, but to step into it. Are you ready to hear Esther's story again? Not as a fairy tale memory, but as a whisper from the spirit realm that says, Esther is the past, but you are the present, and the vision is unfolding. Esther, the one born for a moment. She was not born into royalty. No noble blood, no power strategies, and no training to become part of history. She was an orphan girl, raised in exile among a conquered people. Her name was Hadassah. People only knew the name Esther when she entered the Persian palace. But heaven had called her by her true name before any crown was ever placed on her head. Because God does not choose people based on position. He chooses them based on timing. And Esther's timing came like a whirlwind, an unexpected summons, a queen dethroned, an empire swaying between feasts and conspiracies. Esther did not seek position. She was brought in as one among hundreds. But what made her different was not her beauty. It was her silence when others rushed to speak. It was her humility among those who adorned themselves. And that very stillness opened the door of destiny. When the former queen was cast down and the king sought a replacement, Esther was chosen. No one knew why. Perhaps it was her appearance. Maybe it was her presence. But the angel knew the real reason she was the one born for such a time. Esther did not know her role ahead of time. She just did the right thing in every small moment, obeyed her adoptive father, kept her Jewish identity hidden, didn't demand, didn't stand out. But each small act was the foundation for a greater moment, because greatness doesn't begin with a trumpet. It begins with quiet faithfulness until danger arrived. A man named Hamon, full of hatred, was given power by the king to wipe out the Jews. A decree was written, a day was set, a people sentenced to death. Esther, now queen, was stunned. She could stay silent, she could pretend not to know. She could think, this isn't my battle. But Mordecai, her adoptive father, sent a message. If you remain silent now, deliverance will come from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows? Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. It wasn't a threat. It was an awakening. And Esther, once silent in the palace, spoke up. She asked the people to fast for 3 days. She did not eat, did not drink, did not dress up. She only prayed. Because she knew, no vision is strong enough without a surrendered soul. No plan succeed without sacrifice. And after 3 days, she entered, uninvited, no protection, only faith and a trembling heart. She said, if I perish, I perish. And the royal door opened. It wasn't just a victory. It was a miracle that rewrote history. The Jews were saved, the enemy was defeated, and a woman, once forgotten in exile, was engraved into God's redemption plan. And what about you? Do you feel like just an ordinary person in a world too big? Do you feel unworthy to stand inside a vision? Do you think you don't matter in the midst of unfolding events? Esther thought the same, until the moment called her name, and she answered. When the missile awakens the prophecy. She was not born on a battlefield, nor raised to become a political symbol. Esther was just a young girl taken away in silence into the palace of the king who ruled over her own people. She did not choose that position. She didn't know her beauty would shake an empire. But beneath the layers of royal silk, her tears still fell quietly, because she knew she was in a place that didn't belong to her. And the day came. The day Hamon wrote the decree, sealed it so her entire people would be destroyed. No one knew Esther was Hebrew. No one thought she would do anything. But in those darkest hours, a wake-up call came from Mordecai. If you stay silent now, deliverance will come from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And the question was not, would Esther speak up? But would she dare to die for something sacred? Over 2,500 years later, you are not living in the Persian court, but you are living on the other side of that history. Once again, Iran, the land once called Persia, is rising like a storm. And once again, the name of Israel is not on a peace treaty, but on the nose of a missile. Do you see the pattern? Back then it was a decree to kill God's people. Today it's weapon systems aimed straight at Jerusalem. Back then it was Hamon using royal power to destroy the covenant. Today it's leaders declaring genocide on international TV. Do you think this is just politics? Or are you seeing an old spirit returning in a new form? Esther was not sent to the court to become queen. She was sent to be a bridge between earth and heaven, between power and survival, between the kingdom of man and the plan of God. You don't need to wear a crown. You don't need to walk into a throne room. But you, like Esther, were born for such a time as this. She entered the throne room uninvited, risking death on the spot, but she said, "If I perish, I perish. What about you? You are not facing swords, but you are facing numbness. Apathy as prophecy unfolds. Familiarity so deep that nothing feels sacred anymore." Esther fell to the ground for 3 days of prayer. This story is not about a queen. It's about a soul ready to die so a people might live. And if you still think, "I'm not in Iran, I'm not into politics, I'm just watching the news," then you've forgotten. The news is about the land God once chose as the center of His promise. And history is repeating with you as the living witness. You don't need to be political. You only need to do what Esther did. Hear the call in the hour of crisis, and answer with unconditional surrender, because not everyone is placed in a decisive moment. But those who are cannot stay silent. But the journey doesn't end here. Because what was once sealed in ancient darkness is now slowly being revealed in the light of the final days. And if your heart still knows how to tremble, the tear behind the golden curtain. She didn't choose where she was born, didn't choose who she was, and certainly didn't choose to become queen in the palace of a nation that once sought to destroy her people. Esther, a young orphan girl taken into the Persian court, a powerful dynasty, a vast empire, where her beauty was chosen by the king, but her soul still belonged to another king. No one in the court knew she was Jewish. No one realized that behind those gentle eyes was a heart carrying the fate of an entire people. And when the decree of extermination was issued, when death hovered over her people like nightfall over the kingdom, Esther did not choose silence. She stepped into a place forbidden by law, the throne room of the king. She knew the price. One tilt of the king's head could kill her in an instant. But she said, "If I perish, I perish." Perhaps you think that was over 2,000 years ago? Perhaps you think Esther is a legendary figure unrelated to you. But pause for a moment, because you are also living in a time where another decree is being written, not on paper, but in data streams, on global platforms, in propaganda veiled in modern language. A decree against holiness, against truth, against what once belonged to the covenant. You were not dragged into a palace like Esther, but you were born into an era where silence could mean complicity. You don't hear a trumpet calling for assembly, but you clearly see the battle lines are forming. And now, the one looking at this screen, you are the one who must answer a question like Esther's. If I don't speak up, who will? The girl from the past stood up, not with an army, not with weapons, but with obedience and courage born of faith. And you? Are you ready to step out of your comfort zone, beyond religious camouflage, beyond a quiet life numb to heaven's call? Esther did her part. She is no longer here to say more. But you are still alive, and the ending is still being written. She passed through the golden curtain to stand before an earthly throne. But you, will you dare to step through fear and kneel before the one who awaits you at the eternal throne? The star hidden in the darkness. Her name was Hadassah, a simple name meaning myrtle tree. But when she entered the Persian court, she was called by another name, Esther. It means star. The world seemed to lift her out of the crowd to make her a symbol of beauty and power. But heaven chose her to be a symbol of something deeper. Courage in silence, faithfulness in darkness, obedience in confusion. Esther did not see the miracle beforehand. She didn't know the king would extend the scepter. No angel appeared to tell her what would happen. All she had was a cry in tears, and a belief that if someone was listening, it was the one who had seen her since she was an orphan child. And you have a name too. Not Hadassah, not Esther, but a name only heaven can truly call in its fullness. You too are hidden in a chaotic world. No one knows you're carrying a spiritual burden. No one sees the nights you toss and turn asking, Lord, why am I here in this time? But you know you were not born by accident. You know something is stirring in your spirit. You know there is a calling not from man, but from somewhere deeper, more sacred. Esther was not a preacher, not more talented than the other young women. She was simply someone willing to step out, willing to stand in the gap between destruction and grace. And because of someone like that, a people were saved. You may not see yourself as important. You may think, I'm just an ordinary person. But you don't know. In heaven's plan, the ordinary are often the hidden stars in the dark night. And when the appointed time comes, that star must shine, not to be admired, but to guide the way to life. Esther shone in the Persian night like a star no one expected. And you, born in the last days, what will you do with the light in your soul? The call for such a time as this. Who knows but that you have come to the palace for such a time as this? Mordecai's words were not words of comfort. They were words of awakening. Because among countless girls chosen, only Esther dared to stand, dared to risk it all, dared to accept that if she remained silent, salvation would come from somewhere else. But she would be passed over, and the same is being spoken to you. Who knows, perhaps for this very moment, a world on fire, an order shifting, you were born. Not to be a spectator, not to just watch the news, share posts, or discuss events, but to step into your part in a story greater than any empire. If Esther stayed silent, her people would be destroyed. And if you stay silent, your soul may begin to die from apathy, from the habit of busyness, from unnamed fear. Esther had no prophet to guide her, no complete Bible, no social media to share a warning. But she had one thing, the courage to say, if I must die, I will die. And you have the Bible, you have history, you have prophecy, you have every sign that the final age is shifting, and you still have time. But do you have the courage to offer yourself, not to die, but to live fully in your purpose? The call for you does not come from man. It comes from where Esther was once called in the darkness of the palace, where Daniel was once awakened by an angel in the land of Persia, where even today a whisper is stirring inside you. Oh, beloved, do not be afraid. Stand up, for the word has been sent to you. And if you can still hear that call in your heart, then don't turn away. Because beyond the call is the moment of decision, and beyond the moment is the fate of a people and a soul. The church in the final battle. There was one thing Esther did not know when she entered the palace, that she was not just an individual chosen. She was the representation of her entire people. The survival of an entire generation hung by the decision of one woman, a solitary body but carrying the burden of a nation. So it is with the church today. You may think you're just an individual, a believer among countless people on this earth, a follower of God in a world flooded with news, chaos, and deception. But you are not alone, and you are not nameless, because you carry a sacred role handed down from those who stood before you. From Daniel in the Persian Empire, from Esther in the royal court, from the nameless saints who prayed in the shadows, so the light of the end times could break through. The church was not born to be a bystander. not to comment on events as if they were just headlines, but to become the spiritual sword cutting through the darkness of this age. To be the salt when the world decays, the light when night falls over Jerusalem. And if you think you're too small to change anything, remember, all of hell once trembled because of one heart that truly prayed, one who dared to cry out in the night, one who fasted amid compromise, one who said Amen even when it might cost their life. Esther did not represent a religion. She didn't come to argue theology. She only knew if she didn't speak up, her people would be erased. And what about the church? You've heard the prophecies. You've seen Israel stir. You've watched tensions erupt between Iran and the nations. You've read the book of Revelation. You've seen evil called good and holiness labeled outdated. But have you prayed? Not ceremonial prayers, not recited lines, but prayers with a broken heart, crying for your generation, calling upon the Holy One to intervene in the night. The church was not made to live peacefully in Persia. The church was born to confront Haman's plan. And if Esther had to face death to save her people, then the church must die to self, to birth spiritual life for the people. Because you are not just a listener, you are the remnant, the ones preserved for the final days. Esther in a time of crisis, the prayers no one hears, but heaven answers. And if the church is Esther, then the enemy also waits behind the curtain. One who seemed defeated, but is preparing to return in a different form with different words, but the same spirit, the return of Hamon. In the old story, Hamon was not just a villain. He was the shadow of a spirit against the covenant. A man with high rank in the empire, yet filled with hatred for the people of God. Not because they caused harm, not because they invaded, simply because they carried a sacred name he could not bear. He didn't need the entire people killed for strategic reasons. He just wanted them erased. No longer existing, no longer mentioned, no longer remembered. And if you thought Hamon was executed on that ancient wooden pole, you've forgotten. His spirit was never buried. It slithered through the centuries, hiding behind policies, wearing the disguise of arguments that seem humanitarian, but carry the heart of destruction. You don't have to look far. Today, once again, Hamon is whispering in international summits. He appears in declarations. Israel has no right to exist. He redraws the map of the Middle East, leaving out the one nation marked by the covenant. Hamon no longer needs to shout. He has networks. He has allies. He has the weapons of words. He has the media. He doesn't hang poles in the public square, but he weaves accusations, resolutions, and brainwashing campaigns, all to silence a people who refuse to be silent. And you think, this is just politics? You think it's about land, religion, historical conflict? Number. It's the ancient battle between Hamon and the covenant, between darkness and light, between the one who wants to erase names and the one who carved them on his palm. Today's Hamon no longer wears the robes of the Persian Empire. He wears suits, speaks formally, appears in prestigious councils. But his spirit has not changed. He still wants the same thing: to erase Israel, to bury the covenant, to silence people like Mordecai, those who will not bow to systems of compromise. And if you're someone who still believes in truth, you will see every step in today's timeline carries the echo of footsteps from one who once hung from a rope. An adversarial spirit is returning, not once, but in many forms, from conspiracy theories to extremist movements, from ambiguous speeches to covert elimination plans. Because Hamon doesn't need total control, he just needs the church to stay silent. And while Hamon sits at the negotiation table, Esther remains silent. But time will not wait anymore. Because the knocking from heaven is echoing one last time, before silence becomes the accusation. Esther's final door. That door was not in the palace, not gilded, no guards, no names carved on it. It was just a moment, a crack between fear and courage. A nod toward truth, even if the price was her very life. And Esther stood before that door. No one pushed her in. No one forced her to speak. No one, except the voice from within. If you do not speak, salvation will come from somewhere else. But you will disappear. Esther was not sent by an angel, no vision, no voice from heaven. Only a silence. She could no longer endure, because silence at this moment was no longer humility. It was betrayal. Betrayal of her people, betrayal of her roots, betrayal of the very reason she was chosen as queen for such a time. You see, Esther was not chosen for her beauty, not for her wisdom, but because she was someone still able to hear the calling in a time when everyone chose silence. Today that door opens again, not in a palace, but in your heart. And that calling is no longer for some Jewish girl from the past. It's for you, the one born into a moment when the covenant is once again under threat. You don't have to be Jewish, don't have to be a prophet, don't need to understand all the layers of Daniel or Revelation. You only need to know that you are living on this side of time, the side Esther never reached. The side where all prophecies have begun to stir. If you are the church, then you are Esther in the present. You live in the palace of comfort, of digital culture, of platforms and voices. You have a voice. You have a position. But will you open your mouth? Will you speak while Hamon drafts his resolutions? Will you step through your fear to save those no one names? Will you do what Esther once did, not because you see the result, but because you can no longer bear your own silence? She once said, "If I perish, I perish." Not because she wanted to die, but because she would rather die in truth than live betraying the reason she was born. And today, the door opens again. No one is calling your name, except the one who once called Esther in the shadows of an empire. Will you step through, or turn away and let the door close while your soul remains outside? Because this is no longer the story of the past. It is the final invitation from a vision that has awakened, from Queen Esther to you. She wasn't born to be a queen, but she was chosen to rise at the right moment. In the Persian Empire, where death awaited anyone who entered the throne room uninvited, Esther knelt. Esther prayed, and Esther answered because she knew if she stayed silent in the moment of destiny, she would lose her place in God's plan. And you are living in the very hour that prophecy is rising. No longer on ancient scrolls, but on news screens. No longer the voice of priests, but sirens of warning in the modern world. You don't have to be a queen. You don't have to approach any throne. You only have to step into the role God has set apart for you, and do not stay silent. For Esther was placed in that position for such a time as this. And you are living in that very time. You are no longer outside the vision. You are living within its final pages. Esther saved a nation through obedience. You may save your soul through repentance. Esther walked into the throne room without being called. You are being called, and only need to walk in. Don't let your silence cost this generation. Don't let a hardened heart make you miss an eternal plan. For the final invitation is not coming from a Persian throne, but from heaven, sent to you. If your heart is stirring and if your soul feels something is calling your name, come back. not to a religion, but to the one who wrote the story before creation. And if inside you, something is trembling, if you know you've been touched not by a video, but by something sacred stirring within, then don't turn off the screen as if you heard nothing important. Because maybe this is not just a reminder. It is a final call meant just for you. Share this video, not because it's good, but because someone else is asleep in the last days. Subscribe to this channel, not to follow updates, but to walk alongside the revelations rising in our time. For you were not born by accident, you are not a spectator. You carry a role in the final chapter, and that calling is still echoing, not from the Persian throne, but from the place where heaven is awaiting your answer. You can stay silent like so many others, or you can rise like Esther. The choice is yours, but time is no longer plenty.